I get the pleasure of introducing, I think, someone that has shown quite a bit of interest in the area that we're all interested in tonight. He is a former colleague of ours at CETF. He has actually sat on our board. He is a well-known person in the area of leading scholars of urban public education, equity, and school reform. He has done an amazing amount of research that focuses on the ways in which schools are influenced by social and economic conditions, as well as by demographic trends in local, regional, and global contexts. He is a prolific writer and has done over 250 research articles in academic journals, book chapters and edited volumes, research reports, editorials in places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. He has also authored or co-authored 13 books. I didn't know that, Pedro. That's really great. We are excited to hear from him on his insights and understanding the upward battle our educators face when they teach to engage students in a thoughtful manner. He is interested in examining the most effective ways to enhance young learners' educational experiences with the very education leaders here today. His work focuses on adding to the community foundation of our schools. CETF and School to Home are thankful for his insights and support, and when we are searching for ways to best support students during distance learning and now beyond distance learning. I want to thank and welcome Dr. Pedro Noguera to the stage.
Good evening. Oh, good evening. Good to be with you all. I was probably just as interested in that as you were, being concerned about being overcharged on our internet and the bundling fees. So I know this is all really important. I wanted to use my time with you to reflect on the lessons of the pandemic. What did we learn? And I want you to just remember for a moment that for at least a year, if not more, the whole world had to stop. We had to stop what we were doing to a large degree. I say to a large degree because we also know there were essential workers out there who never stopped, who kept working. I remember in my neighborhood, I would hear the hammering of construction workers because their work never stopped. And I said, well, I guess they don't worry about COVID. Mexican workers don't worry about COVID because they're out there every single day. And then when I went to the supermarket, was happy to see that the markets were open. I guess the cashiers don't worry about COVID because they're essential too. But many of us who had the luxury of working from home got to stop. And when we stopped, we got to reflect on our lives, what was really important. Some of us did some baking. I did some baking with my daughter, learned to make chocolate banana bread, which was really a hit. Some of us got to read more, exercise more. Not everybody. Some got the COVID-20 or so. But stopping was important because it forced us to realize that, guess what? Life is just not always going to go the way it seems. And sometimes when you get an interruption like that, a disruption, it gives you a chance to reflect on what's really most important. During that time, I started a new job at USC. I left UCLA, became dean at USC of the School of Education, which was weird because I was working with people I never got to see in person. Right? Did everything by Zoom, but Zoom works. So I realized how important technology was for keeping people connected. I did dozens of presentations all around the world from the comfort of my home, in my pajamas, right? And shorts. And I thought about what was happening in our schools. And I said, the worst thing we could do is to go back to normal. Because normal was not working for a lot of people. Right? Normal too often meant kids were disengaged, bored, alienated. Teachers were feeling beaten down, stressed. Systems were working, people showing up, but were they really? Were we really achieving the purpose of education? Think about how many people you know who were getting misinformation from the internet during that time about the COVID and spreading it around, saying 5G is what's doing it. It's 5G that's what's killing us out here. Right? Or misinformation about vaccines and spreading it. And we started to realize, you know what, we have access to all this information, but without a good education, you can be easily misled. You can be easily fooled. And then there was the politics. Right? We went from witnessing George Floyd get murdered on camera and seeing this racial justice movement just spring up across not just the country, but the world in reaction, to then seeing the backlash, and then the insurrection. And many of us are watching like, this is just incredible. The country's falling apart. And it's being led by the person we thought was the president, mounting a coup against his own country. What were the lessons of the pandemic? Life throws us challenges. If you don't learn from those challenges, you know what happens? You keep repeating the same mistakes. What are the lessons for education from the pandemic? Well, one of the lessons is technology is helpful, right? Because through technology, we were able to keep many kids connected, and I want to give LA Unified especially a big shout out for getting devices to people, keeping people connected, even though, before we get too happy, we also acknowledge that many people had bad internet and weren't really able to connect, or had too many people living in their apartment, so there were too many people online at once, and therefore the home was not really a place where they could get their work done. And that wasn't just true for the kids, it was true for the teachers. Right? But we figured it out, we made do, we got through, we're still here. And so now we get to go back. What did we learn from it? One of the things I worry about is, as we think about the learning loss, we may have learned the wrong lesson. Learning loss is real. I'll be clear about that. There are a lot of kids who could not learn via Zoom. My daughter was one of them. Right? She would bring her dog on for Zoom lessons, and nobody's looking at the teacher. They're all looking at the dog, all the kids. Right? What else did we learn, though? One of the things we learned, we should have learned, is that if you don't bring some joy to education, you're not going to connect with these kids. If you don't find a way to lift the morale of the people who are teaching our children, many of them are going to stop teaching altogether because they feel beaten down. Today, I got to go to my first school since the pandemic. First time, other than my daughter's school, but first time I was actually in a school. I was on 54th Street School, and I was just so pleased by some of the things I saw. Because I saw a school that had music, and kids were singing. And you know, when you see kids singing, it's like the birds singing, right? It just lifts your spirits again, because kids love to sing, right? And I saw teachers who had figured out how to use technology to differentiate and to personalize learning for kids. So in the same classroom, kids were working at their own pace, and the teacher was now the facilitator of learning. I sat in on a literacy lesson where kids were moving during literacy as they learned frequently used words, sight words, and loving it. I got to see one of our new teachers who's at that school now, who was happy to be working, mask on still, but fully engaged with those kids. And they were loving her. And I asked her, how's it going? She says, I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving, but I like it here. I love these kids. That's what she said. This was not a school that took the newest teacher and gave him the hardest job. You know those schools? And then they wonder why the teacher burnt out after a year. Right? This was not a school that takes kids who come with challenges and special needs and relegates them to the principal's office or to some place for somebody else to deal with, and then wonders why they're not learning. This was not a place that's afraid of parents, because there were parents in the building, working with teachers and working with staff. I went into the library, and I was like blown away, because not only did they have books, they had comfortable seating for kids, so kids would want to be there. And so what left me feeling positive and hopeful was that it seemed I was in a place that had learned from the pandemic. They learned, yeah, technology is a tool that can help us. It really can. Anybody who doesn't get that is probably not paying attention, right? It's a real tool that can facilitate learning, especially if the educators know how to use those tools. But it's also a danger. As many of us know now, with kids who are addicted to their phones and to their devices, and who are spending way too much time on TikTok and not getting enough sleep. And so how do we make sure this tool doesn't control us, but is used to facilitate the things we need, the things we want, especially for our children? One of the things we know, and we especially know it with the kids, is people need people. That's why something like this is so important, to be together. We could have done this on Zoom, right? Wouldn't be the same, though. Wouldn't be the same, because once we're together, we have a chance to challenge each other, talk each other, laugh together. That's what the kids need, too. It's not surprising that so many kids are dealing with mental health crisis now because they were in isolation too long. Too long. And so depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, it's way up there. But the cure for a lot of that is coming back together again. Not to drill them and beat them down to prepare them for the next test, but to bring some joy to learning. So they want to be there. They want to be engaged. So I raise that because I think that if we don't learn the right lesson, we'll miss the moment we're in. This was a disruption. And we needed to disrupt things because the path we've been on as a world has been unsustainable, especially in terms of the environment. But even in terms of education, we had it all wrong. One of the things that the educators were explaining to me today is that they're trying to help teachers to understand, and it's hard, that the pacing guides they used to use, they need to throw them away. And they need to be much more focused on the learning than the covering. Right? Because teaching and learning go together. And when they go together in ways where we connect with kids, it can be powerful. And the power comes from the relationships. The power comes from the connections, the community that we build. And so even as we think about technology and access should be a fundamental right in this country, because we know those who don't have it are left out of vital services, not just education, health services, a whole number of things we need now, and not just Amazon, but things we really need, made possible by connecting via their internet. But still, it's the connecting we do together as people that really comes down to what we need the most. The research is really profoundly clear. People who are isolated don't do well. They don't live as long. They're more depressed. They're sicker. People who are connected are happier, healthier. That's true for our kids too. I always say that you can never improve a school just by giving that school more money. I've never seen a school that got better because they got more money. I've never seen a contract make people work harder, though I believe in paying people well. When I go to schools, like the one I went to today, where there's high morale, when people are feeling good about what they do, what makes that school work, and schools like it, is a culture, a community of shared commitments, shared vision, shared goals. So I want you to keep that in mind as we think about going back and addressing the learning loss and responding to the inequities that got exacerbated by the pandemic. Because we can't just go back to normal. Normal wasn't working. We've got to make it better. Part of making it better is bringing education to life and really connecting with those kids in our classroom. So I want to thank the educators in the room, thank the nonprofits in the room that are helping them, and just say that, education is the key to our future. I don't have too much faith in politicians. Right? They all promise you all kinds of things, and then they get elected, and not much changes. I have faith in those kids in our rooms. And my hope that some of them could be the next artists and writers and scientists that'll solve the problems that this generation passed on to them. They've got a lot of problems to solve. So that's why we do this, because education is key to our future. And so that future is in your hands. I wish you all the best doing that work. Thank you.